Hi, good morning to all of you. Once again, welcome to the free sessions for Political Science Optional. I hope I am audible to you, right? Am I audible to you? Am I audible to you? Can you hear me? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So, before we move to our today's session, I'll just give a very brief recap of what we are saying in the last class. So, we started with trying to identify what is political ideology, and we even did an analysis among ourselves to understand what is our political stand. We have, we have gone through a small test. We did a small test and we tried to place ourselves in the political spectrum, right? Okay. Then what we did, then we looked into the first ideology, that is the liberalism. The ideology that has developed in the 17th century in the Western world, the ideology that has continued to lead the world in many spectrum, and we have tried to analyze the basic core themes of liberalism, and also we try to understand what is actually meant by classical liberalism and how it is being implemented. So that was the point till which we have discussed in the last class, right? Fine? Okay. Now, what has happened interestingly is that even on one side, when liberalism along with the capitalist economic ideology is garnering lots of attention among countries, it was also resulting in inequalities in communities. It was also resulting in lots of inequalities within the communities. This inherent neglect of humanity has actually made people to rethink about another ideology. So, as a criticism to liberalism, people started putting forward a new concept known as socialism. But we will be moving to socialism later. But the rise of socialism started actually made the liberals to start thinking, what had we made, what was the problem? What did we do wrong in classical liberalism? And how could we address that? So you know that in classical liberalism, the role of the state is very negative, very minimal. Okay, the role is to be not to interfere, just to be there to protect the life, liberty and property. But that, the question was it actually the role of the state? Should the state do something to protect the poor that get oppressed in the market economy? So these questions and the rise of socialism actually made people to rethink about the political ideologies being followed within liberalism. And that is what actually resulted in the rise of modern liberalism. So there has been strong criticism to the classical liberalism. Okay, so the classical liberalism has been criticized. It is being, it looks man as very egoistic and selfish. Only as a person, each individual is being identified as very egoistic and selfish. Why? Because they are only pursuing their own objectives. Okay. So just before I continue, I just want to take a call. Is there anybody who doesn't understand Malayalam? I think Abhi is here, right? Abhi is here and Alisa is there. Okay, fine. So there is an inherent criticism towards classical liberalism. And the criticism? The criticism is that man, it considers man as self-interest, selfish and egoistic. Okay. അതായത് മനുഷ്യൻ ഭയങ്കര സെൽഫിഷാണ്, ഭയങ്കര ഈഗോയിസ്റ്റിക് ആണ്, അവൻ്റെ ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ് മാത്രമേ അവൻ പെർസ്യൂ ചെയ്യുന്നുള്ളൂ. And because of that, and what happens, there is lots of inequalities within the society. When the poor gets poor, should the state intervene over there? All these questions actually started being discussed during the 1930s and the 1940s. When America was actually going through the Great Depression, or the economic conditions of America was very bad, there started a new argument that the state has a positive role to play. So, when we started discussing about modern liberalism, the fundamental difference between modern liberalism and classical liberalism is the role played by the state. You know that in classical liberalism, state was to be very minimal, right? The role of the state was to be very minimal. No, it is only there to protect the life, liberty and property. State need not intervene and act in the economy. Economy works better when it is left alone. That was the idea of Adam Smith. Now, because of the criticism that has been raised against the classical liberalism, people started rethinking about the role of the state. And now they argued that we want an interventionist state. Interventionist state. So, what is an interventionist state? So, an intervention state is that state which intervene in the market economy so that the conditions of the poor are actually uplifted. Interesting, right? And that is the fundamental difference between classical liberalism and modern liberalism. അതായത് സോഷ്യലിസം പറയുന്നത് പോലെ ഫോക്കസ് കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയിലേക്ക് പോകുന്നില്ല. The focus has been changed, has not been changed to community. The focus is still on the individual. But the role played by the state gets changed. And when we say the focus is still on the individual, we started identifying more important provisions for the individual also. So, let's try to recap. There was a lot of criticism against classical liberalism, which made people to rethink about the role of the state. During the Great Depression, and there was actually a New Deal signed in US. So, as per this concept, the state has to intervene in the market and to ensure that jobs are there for the people and to ensure that the social conditions of the people are uplifted. Okay. So, this has been followed in UK also. So, during 1940s onwards, we started seeing an active role played by the state. And we tried to redefine the rights of the individuals also. We started identifying more rights to the individual. Okay, and we started talking about the concept of positive liberty, etc. And all these actually constitute as what? Modern liberalism. State in the rule kodi, individual kudal rights നമ്മൾ ഐഡന്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യുന്നു. ലിബർട്ടി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നെഗറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടി എന്നൊക്കെ മാറിയിട്ട് പോസിറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടിയിലേക്ക് പോവാം. ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് all these are actually core themes of modern liberalism. Now let's understand the basic themes once again. So I hope you understand that how it has originated, right? So it has originated as there was criticism to classical liberalism. So they were actually trying to reinvent liberalism without losing the focus on the individual by identifying a new role for the state. State എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ രാജ്യം. അപ്പോൾ പണ്ട് നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞത് എന്താ? In classical liberalism we told that okay, state don't intervene. Okay, now we talk about state actually intervening in it. Okay? So I hope you got this much, right? Now you got that transition, right? From the criticism to classical liberalism to the modern liberalism. Fine. So everybody got it? Has everyone got it? So basically, we are identifying a new role to the state in order to address or rectify the injustice caused by following classical liberalism. Okay, so we are trying to address the injustice and inequalities in the society, primarily because the fact that we are given a free rein to economy. And that is what is being done in modern liberalism. Okay. So far you are fine, right? You got it. Now let's move to the core themes. Okay. So we are trying to see the core themes in classical liberalism. Okay. First one is individuality. Individuality. Then positive liberty. Okay, positive liberty, social liberalism, and finally economic management. So let's see the core themes of modern liberalism. Individuality. So that is when people normally ask me, sir, Socialism is a critic to liberalism. Then modern liberalism is also a critic to the idea of liberalism. Now, how are they different? They are primarily different. Okay, because in modern liberalism, we are not losing the focus on the individual. We are still talking about the individual. Okay, fine. Now, let's take each of these values and try to understand what do you mean by these core values. Understood? So, first one is individuality. So, we will be studying about J.S. Mill while we discuss the political thinkers. So, basically J.S. Mill is identified as the one who has bridged the gap between classical liberalism and modern liberalism. So, you will see that Mill was also interested in the concept of utilitarianism, and yesterday we discussed about utilitarianism, right? Greatest happiness of the greatest number. So, Mill was also interested about the concept of utilitarianism, but over a period he tried to redefine utilitarianism. Okay, earlier utilitarianism was focusing only on the numbers. Keep maximum happiness, keep maximum people happy. But then later on we started redefining that concept of utilitarianism by Mill, which is something that we will be studying. So, Mill has tried to redefine utilitarianism, and he is the one who has actually tried to bridge the gap from that classical liberalism to modern liberalism. So, Mill started identifying a more important role to the individual. So, we didn't lose out the focus on individual. While we talk about classical liberalism, also the focus was on individual. But the difference is that we identify that man has the autonomy and he has the right to achieve, or he has the right for self-realization. Whatever is actually possible for him, he has the right for that. Despite being poor, despite being rich, he should have the right for self-realization. So, when we identify in that manner and we focus on that individuality, we ask the state, see, we are focusing on individuality. So, despite being rich or poor, he should have those abilities, or he should have those conditions which is required for what? Required for his self-realization. That is, നേരത്തെ നമ്മൾ ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലി ഫോക്കസ് ചെയ്തായിരുന്നു ക്ലാസിക്കൽ ലിബറലിസ്റ്റുകൾ. പക്ഷേ മോഡേൺ ലിബറലിസ്റ്റിൽ വരുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പറയുകയാണ് ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലിന് ഡെസ്പൈറ്റ് ഹിസ് എക്കണോമിക് കണ്ടീഷൻസ് ഷുഡ് ഹാവ് ദാറ്റ് എബിലിറ്റി ഫോർ സെൽഫ് റിയലൈസേഷൻ എന്ന് നമ്മൾ ഐഡൻറ്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാം. അപ്പം ഇവിടെ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ആക്റ്റീവ്ലി ഇൻവോൾവ് ആകുമ്പോഴാണ് ആ ഇൻഡിവിജ്വാലിറ്റി പ്രൊട്ടക്ട് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നത്. മനസ്സിലായോ? only when the state actively involved, then only the concept of individuality will be able to be protected. So, in modern liberalism, they don't believe in the poor becoming poor. They believe that the state has to intervene so that the disadvantaged section will also be uplifted. So, that is the concept over here. Okay. Now, next is positive liberty. Okay, next is positive liberty. So, what do you mean by positive liberty? We normally talk about negative liberty when we say that the state need not intervene into the space of the individual. That means, like the individual is here, he has certain liberty. While we are talking about negative liberty, we primarily focus on state not interfering into the space, individual space. Okay, understood? That is the concept of negative liberty. State not intervening into the space of the individual, and I mean that is the liberty that the individual enjoys. But now we started talking about positive liberty. Okay, so T.H. Green is a major thinker when it comes to positive liberty. So, what is the primary concept of positive liberty? Very simple. State not only has, state is not only restricted from entering into the domain of the individual, the state also has to play a positive role. State do have certain obligations. Only when the state is actually there to protect the individual's right and fulfill those obligations, then only the individual will actually be able to achieve that self-realization. So, what it primarily means is that right now the individual enjoys not only the negative liberty but also the positive liberty. That means we are identifying a new role to the state. അതായത് ക്ലാസിക്കൽ ലിബറലിസത്തിൽ മോഡേൺ ലിബറലിസത്തിലേക്ക് വരുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും we see that individual and we say that okay, he enjoys positive liberty also. എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ എന്താ പോസിറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടി? അതായത് സ്റ്റേറ്റ് അവൻ്റെ ഡെവലപ്മെൻറ്റിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യണം. സ്റ്റേറ്റ് വിൽ take measures to improve his or make conditions which will result in his self-realization. Education, health പോലുള്ള സെഗ്മെന്റിൽ സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഇന്റർവെയിൻ ചെയ്യണം. So that is the concept of positive liberty. Understood? മനസ്സിലായോ? So in order to enhance the capacity of the individual, we know there should be state intervention. Okay, have you understood? So the concept of capacity building is something that we identify in positive liberty. And who has the responsibility? And we identify that the state has a responsibility over here. Okay, earlier we didn't identify this new concept or the new role of the state. Okay, has everyone got it? എല്ലാവർക്കും മനസ്സിലായോ? Any doubt? Okay, so T.H. Green is someone who was normally being identified as the father of positive liberty. So he started redefining liberty in terms of capacity. So the state has to ensure that the capacity of the individuals is fulfilled. Therefore, the state has to play a positive role. Okay, so from there, we need to actually move to the next idea, that is social liberalism. Okay, so Anne has one doubt. Anne says, state remains isolated from just the private space of the individual, right? So when we say that the state has a positive role to play, that doesn't mean that the state can actually restrict the rights of the individual as being identified in classical liberalism. But classical liberalism പറഞ്ഞ നെഗറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടിയുടെ കൺസെപ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ട്. സ്റ്റേറ്റ് അനാവശ്യമായിട്ട് ഇടപെടത്തില്ല, ബട്ട് സ്റ്റേറ്റ് പോസിറ്റീവ്ലി ഇടപെടും. എന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് on one sphere, the state, when the individual is here, the state don't intervene into my rights, into my personal space. But on the other side, when we talk about the positive liberalism, the state is actually is obligated to increase my capability and capacity, right? So there the state need to focus on the education, the health, etc. So that role has been identified with respect to the state. Understood? So the state do plays an important role, but state doesn't take away the rights of the individual. Okay, so more rights are being identified. So the role of the state increases. Fine. So we have seen individuality, we have seen positive liberty. Now social liberalism. What do you mean by social liberalism? So just before moving to, excuse me, fine. So I'm back. So before moving to the concept of social liberalism, I just want to add on something to the idea of positive liberalism. Okay. See, T.H. Green, who is identified as the father of positive liberty, has criticized classical liberty in certain concepts. See, in liberalism or in a capitalist mode of economy, we normally say that everybody has a choice. Everybody has a choice. If the working conditions is very bad, if you don't want to work, then don't work. But in fact, do you think everybody has a choice? If my choice is between poor working condition or inhuman working condition and poverty, what should I choose? Should I choose poverty? So when we say that everybody has the freedom to choose, T.H. Green criticizes that and say that everybody don't. When the choice is between poverty and inhuman working condition with less pay, people do make that choice. Have you understood that concept? Have you understood that criticism? We normally say that in a free market economy, everybody is free. Who is actually forcing you to take up the job? There is no, nobody is actually pressurizing you to take the job. There is no bonded labor, etc. But do you think that we do have that freedom of choice? When the choice is between poverty and inhuman working conditions, what should I choose? പോവർട്ടിയും അതായത് വിശപ്പാണ്, ദാരിദ്ര്യമാണ് ഒരു സൈഡിൽ, അതർ സൈഡിൽ അതായത് ജോലിയുണ്ട് പക്ഷേ ശമ്പളം കുറവാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മോശം വർക്കിംഗ് കണ്ടീഷനാണ്. ഞാൻ എന്ത് ചൂസ് ചെയ്യണം? ശമ്പളം കുറവാണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് ഇപ്പുറത്ത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എനിക്ക് വേറെ എൻ്റെ ചോയ്സുകൾ ഭയങ്കര ലിമിറ്റഡാണ്. മനസ്സിലായോ? സോ മെനി ടൈംസ് the choices before the poor are very much limited, that they are actually forced to take up this inhuman conditions and all. So this is what being opposed by T.H. Green. T.H. Green says that when you talk about freedom in classical liberalism, it is not in fact the actual freedom. People don't have that freedom. So have you understood that? Pooja, should I repeat it? Now, is anybody has any doubt with respect to that criticism? Okay. See, normally what actually happens now, this freedom is something that is being celebrated by the classical liberals. They say that, okay, it's free market economy, everybody has their choice, everybody has their opportunity, but it is not actually correct. It is not actually correct because the choices many a times is very limited for certain segment of the people. And that is what T.H. Green criticizes. So once again, see, T.H. Green strongly criticizes this idea of freedom. Workers are many a times coerced into taking up this inhuman working conditions, low pay, etc. because the choice is between poverty and starvation on one side and the inhuman conditions on the other side. So the freedom is not there actually, and that is what being criticized by T.H. Green. Have you understood it? Ammu, have you got it? Okay, fine. So, and when we say that we follow unrestrained capitalism, so do it actually give opportunity for self-realization for all the people? No, capitalism doesn't give the opportunity for all the people. Okay, equality of opportunity is something that the modern liberals strongly are arguing for. In a free market economy, it is very difficult to actually ensure the equality of opportunity. And the positive liberals believe that through state intervention, we can actually ensure that equality of opportunity. When certain disadvantaged section cannot access the benefits of the market or economy, then the state will actually support them and ensure that there is an equality of opportunity for every people. So that is what we identify by the concept of positive liberty. Okay, and T.H. Green says that, see, why do you worry about state? Classical liberals are always afraid of the state. They believe that the state is going to take away my freedom. T.H. Green says that, see, you are mistakenly identifying state as a threat to individual liberty. State is in fact the guarantor of your liberty. He is the one who is going to protect your liberty. And also he is the one who is actually trying to, has a positive obligation and who is going to ensure that positive liberty also. So you need not worry about state. T.H. Green is strongly in support of state, but in a positive way. Classical liberals was actually very afraid of the state because they believe that state is going to take away their freedom. But T.H. Green says that no, it is that state that is going to ensure your freedom. It is that state that is going to be the guarantor of your freedom. And it is that state that will actually ensure positive liberty or provide these obligations. Got it? I just thought that I just want to add on to that idea of positive liberty by T.H. Green. Everyone, have you got that? Any doubt? Arkelindran doubt undo ipo parna concept. See, for all those people who are coming for the first class today, use our chat box to ask doubt. If you are actually unmuting yourself to ask the doubt, I won't be able to hear since I am taking the studio. Okay. So, okay, I hope it's clear. Now let's move to the idea of social liberalism. So the idea of social liberalism is interesting. See, the private sector is there, the state is there, civil society is there. Okay. Now there has to be an equilibrium between state, private sector and the society. And this equilibrium is what we attain through the concept of social liberalism. That means there has to be a partnership between the state, the private sector and the civil society. And this partnership will actually promote growth for all. It's like a win-win situation. State will actually, the state will be there, private sector will be there, the society will be there. It is not that each one of these elements are antagonistic to each other. All these three elements are not opposing to each other. While we were discussing about classical liberalism, the state was actually seen with a negative. Now we are actually trying to see in a positive note. And we say that there has to be an equilibrium between state, private sector and the civil society. And this partnership is, that equilibrium or partnership is something that will actually ensure what? Ensure growth. So the private sector will actually focus on the growth, the state will act as a facilitator, and the civil society will ensure transparency. And this equilibrium is something that is being identified along with modern liberalism. Okay. Now, economic, so now the third concept is economic management. Okay, one more thing. We have seen individuality, we have identified J.S. Mill. Positive liberty, we have identified T.H. Green. When it comes to social liberalism, we normally talks about John Rawls, Amartya Sen, Joseph Stiglitz. All these people were strongly arguing for that equilibrium between state, private sector and civil society. State, growth. Private sector, facilitate, private sector, growth. State, facilitator. Civil society, transparency. Three elements required for an effective growth. Okay. So, we can bring in Rawls, we can bring in Amartya Sen, and we can also bring in Joseph Stiglitz, who associate with Amartya Sen while we are discussing the element of social liberalism. Okay. So, we are done with individuality, positive liberty, social liberalism. Now, we need to move to economic management. What is economic management? See, as the word suggests, it is to manage economy. It is to manage economy. So, I hope you remember someone I told yesterday. Yesterday I talked about Adam Smith. Remember him? So, he is the one who has actually laid the foundation for capitalism. Okay, in his book Wealth of Nation, he has clearly identified that the economy that is left alone is the best economy. And this has been followed a long time. Now, during the period of Great Depression, could the economy be left alone and let the people starve? Now, that is something that was happening in US for some time. Now, a new concept actually raised over here. And what is that new concept? Okay, so Anne was asking about, Anne, you just want to know about social liberalism. The concept of social liberalism is very simple. Social liberalism identifies that there has to be a partnership between state, that is the government, private sector, that is the free market economy, and civil society. The private sector is the one who will ensure the growth. The state will actually act as a facilitator for the people to be part of the growth, and civil society will actually ensure transparency. And the famous thinkers who has brought this concept are Amartya Sen, John Rawls, etc. So I hope you have got it right. And have you? Okay, fine. Now, we are talking about economic management, and I brought someone who, Adam Smith. See, Adam Smith is not associated with economic management. He was the one who told that don't manage the economy, leave the economy. Leave the economy, don't manage. So he was against what? He was against management. But what was actually happening during the Great Depression? The economy has plummeted. Many people lost their life, their savings, etc. The government was initially not knowing what to do. Then came someone who came there? Then came someone known as J.M. Keynes. Okay. So, he has actually brought a book called The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. And he argued that, see, economy should not be left alone. The state has to actively involve in the economy. Economy has to be managed in order to ensure the growth. Okay, so in addition to providing social welfare, we should actually manage the economy in order to bring in prosperity. And the major thinker was J.M. Keynes. So what has Keynes has actually identified is that there is a positive role for the state. State has to play a positive role. State has to intervene in the economy. Don't leave everything to the free hand of the market. Free hand of the market will not actually resolve the problem. And Keynes actually argued that, see, the government could manage their economies by influencing the demand, adjusting the fiscal policies, etc. See, the problems of unemployment and poverty will not be addressed by the free market economy, will not be addressed by the invisible hand of the market. It will only be addressed when the state intervene. It will only be addressed when the state intervene. See, he was actually strongly arguing that state spending has to increase during the period of depression. During the period of depression, the state has to spend more money, get more people into service, give them more job, give them more job. See, there is an interesting concept Keynes has actually put forward. If there is no new job, let there be one who actually digs a hole, and there should be another one who fills it. See, if there is no new job to be created, let someone dig a hole and someone fill it up, so that two people are actually getting a job, right? So, he has identified that it is not a waste, because the government has to actually protect or ensure the prosperity, and therefore the government has to intervene in the economy. Only when the government intervene in the economy, the problems like poverty, unemployment, etc. could be addressed. See, if you're not worried about that, okay, don't intervene in the market and let the market decide. But he says that if you are worried about unemployment, if you are worried about the poor economic condition, this is a time when the state has to actively involve in the economy. Okay, so understood? So understood that idea of economic management. Individuality we have seen, positive liberty we have seen in detail, then we have seen social liberalism, and we have economic management, and these are the core themes of modern liberalism. So let me just give it in Malayalam, others please excuse. This core theme in the individuality എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും അതായത് ലിബറലിസത്തിൻ്റെ ഫോക്കസ് ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽ അല്ല, അതിൽ മാറ്റമൊന്നുമില്ല. ഓക്കെ, സൊസൈറ്റി അല്ല, ഇൻഡിവിജ്വൽ തന്നെ. പക്ഷെ ഇവിടെ ഇൻഡിവിജ്വലിന് കൂടുതൽ റോൾസ് നമ്മൾ ഐഡൻറ്റിഫൈ ചെയ്യാം. അപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പിന്നെ അടുത്ത് പറയുന്നത് പോസിറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടിയെ പറ്റി പറയാം. നെഗറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടി മാത്രമല്ല, പോസിറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടി. അതായത് സ്റ്റേറ്റിന് ഇത് ആക്റ്റീവ് റോളുണ്ട്. എന്തിനു വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ്? ജനങ്ങളുടെ കപ്പാസിറ്റി എൻഹാൻസ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ടുള്ള, കപ്പാസിറ്റി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, കപ്പാസിറ്റി എൻഹാൻസ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ടുള്ള റോളുണ്ട്. അതിനുവേണ്ടി സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഇൻ്റർവെയിൻ ചെയ്യാൻ പറഞ്ഞു. എഡ്യൂക്കേഷനും ഹെൽത്തിലും ഒക്കെ സ്റ്റേറ്റിന് ആക്ച്വലി ഇൻവോൾവ് ആവാം. പോസിറ്റീവ് ലിബർട്ടി പറഞ്ഞപ്പോഴാണ് ആര് പറഞ്ഞത്? നമ്മുടെ ടി എച്ച് ഗ്രീൻ പറഞ്ഞത് എന്താണ്? യു നീഡ് നോട്ട് വറി അബൌട്ട് ദ സ്റ്റേറ്റ്. സ്റ്റേറ്റ് ഈസ് നോട്ട് എ നെഗേറ്റർ ഓഫ് യുവർ റൈറ്റ്സ്, ബട്ട് ഇൻസ്റ്റെഡ് എ ഗ്യാരണ്ടർ ഓഫ് യുവർ റൈറ്റ്സ്. Okay, and the freedom that you say in capitalism doesn't exist. So he has actually brought in the concept of positive liberty and identifies that state has to play a positive role, not a negative role. Then we talk about social liberalism, which is talking about that that equilibrium between what? ആരൊക്കെ തമ്മില? ഫ്രീ മാർക്കറ്റ്, അതായത് മാർക്കറ്റ്, പ്രൈവറ്റ് സെക്ടർ, പിന്നെ ഗവൺമെൻറ്, പിന്നെ സിവിൽ സൊസൈറ്റി, ഇവർ തമ്മിലുള്ളൊരു എന്ത് വേണം? ഒരു ഇക്വിലിബ്രിയം വേണം. ഫൈനലി എക്കണോമിക് മാനേജ്മെൻറ്റ്, എക്കണോമിയിൽ ഇടപെടണം, ഗവൺമെൻറ് ഇടപെടണം, പുതിയ ജോലികൾ ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം. എങ്കിൽ മാത്രമാണ് അൺഎംപ്ലോയ്മെൻറ്റും അതുപോലെ പോവർട്ടിയും പോലുള്ള ഗ്രേവ് ഇഷ്യൂസ് റിസോൾവ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റത്തുള്ളൂ. മാർക്കറ്റിനെ വിട്ടുകൊടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് റിസോൾവ് ആവത്തില്ല. Is it clear to everyone? Is it clear to everyone so far? Any doubt? Pradeep, Ashik, is it clear? Okay, good. Now, see, what actually happened when the state intervention was there? It was good for some time, right? Everything seems good for some time. So, about from 1940s onwards, it started during the Depression period, so during the 1930 and all, you will observe the elements of state intervention and all, but normally we identify across the world. In US this element started during 1930s itself, but from 1940s onwards, many countries has been following the concept of modern liberalism. So these countries has been practicing it for a long time, and because of this reason, the physical deficit of the country started rising. Why physical deficit is increasing? Because we are telling that, okay, there is an active role for the state has to intervene, state has to positively do this thing. So the state started spending more than what they could, what they are getting. So they started following something known as deficit budgeting. Okay, on one side, the physical deficit started burdening up. On the other side, when the state started doing everything for the individual, the people started becoming lazy. And these states has been criticized as becoming nanny states. Nanny states. So we identify it as a welfare state, right? An interventionist or welfare state. So from that welfare state, now the state has become nanny state. What do you mean by nanny? Who is a nanny? Who is a nanny? Nanny is someone actually take care of our kids, right? So the kids will not be knowing anything. The nanny will actually take care of the kids. The kid will be sleeping. I mean, the nanny will actually, from that sleep to the time they, from the time they get up to the time they sleep, nanny is actually taking care of everything, right? In a similar manner, the state has become a nanny state when from the birth to the death, the state is actually taking care of the activities of the individual. And this started affecting the economy, this started affecting innovations, this started affecting the whole social sector itself. Then people started rethinking, is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to do? And they started asking about, why don't we actually bring the concept of classical liberalism? Let's give more role to the private sector. We need not unnecessarily involve. We have already done, we have improved the conditions and all. If we continue doing this, this is not actually, there is no need to continue do that. We have actually ensured that basic, let's now the things be taken care from the concept of classical liberalism. Or instead of calling it classical liberalism, we call it neoliberalism, which is again also known as neoclassical liberalism. Neoliberalism. So neoliberalism means what? Same as neoclassical liberalism, which is very similar to the classical liberalism which we seen earlier. Role of the state minimal. So we say to the state, you roll back. You go back and be there in the back. Don't intervene. Okay. So the rollback of state. So it is the primary concept of neoliberalism. So rollback of the state. When the state, from the point where the state is taking care of everything for the individual, like a care, like taking care of every aspect of the individual, you roll back. The role of the state be you roll back means that like you are taking the role of the individual from the sector and we are keeping it back. Since this rollback is something that we see in our economy also, right? So as I told yesterday, our government or our Prime Minister has identified the government has no business in business. That means we are rolling back, right? We are rolling back the frontiers of our state. And that is something that has been observed in neoliberalism also. And we started, let the market focus. Let things be decided by the market. Okay, so the fundamentals of neoliberalism is what? The rollback of the state. So we are rolling back the frontiers of the state and we identify the, we are opposed to this dead hand of state. When the state is actually trying to intervene in the economy, it is like a dead hand of the state. It is like a dead hand in the chanda, which is unnecessarily restricting the progress. Okay, so a welfare state becomes unsustainable and it came to be known as nanny state. The balance of payment crisis started because of the physical deficit, then unsustainable level of physical deficit. So all these actually started resulting in an unsustainable mode of economy, which is being criticized a lot. Now then people started asking that, see, private sector is actually good, public is bad. So neoliberals come up with new slogan, that is private good, public bad. So during the time of Margaret Thatcher and all, you can see that there has been strong sentiment among many segment of the people that the government is unnecessarily involving, and I mean, we need to actually take back. And Thatcher is someone who has actually done it. Thatcher is someone who has actually taken back the role of the state. She has taken a very strong measure at that time because there is a lot of criticism against that also. Okay, so in US, in UK, and in many Western countries, we started seeing this rollback of the state, and we started identifying that okay, it is better. I mean, private is actually good, and the public is bad. So we started focusing on the fiscal deficit. We tried to reduce fiscal deficit. Then we need to. Earlier we were actually trying to tax the poor more. Sorry, tax the rich more, and try to use that money for the welfare. Now we are actually changing that, okay, we will give lesser taxation for industry because industry is going to promote growth. So we need to actually, we need to actually support them, support the industry. So for that we bring in pro-industry tax reforms. Then we started focusing on growth and we started giving subsidies for growth. Then instead of intervening in the wage market, let the market determine the wages. Then we have liberalized the trade. There is no restrictions for the trade. Now we, like people can, like if something is cheaper is actually built somewhere, we can actually build, bring that into our country. Then we started disinvesting the public sector enterprises. So the disinvestment. Then we started deregulating our economy. Then we started protecting the concept of property or concept of right to property, etc. So one thing that you will observe that during 1991, when liberalization, privatization, globalization was actually brought into our economy, we are in a process of liberalizing our economy. We are in a process of liberalizing our economy. So right now, our economy is actually moving to this neoliberal concept. We don't say that okay, the state has no role to play, but state do have some role to play, especially in the welfare sector and all. That is why we bring in a universal vaccination policy right now and all. Even if it was after a small instigation by the court, we have brought in the concept of universal vaccination, etc. But what you need to understand is that we are in the process of liberalizing, or we are in the process of the neoliberalism. Now you take care of all these concepts in neoliberalism. Okay, so we are actually providing pro-industry tax reforms are there. Then trade has been liberalized. We have brought in FDI from countries, and we are ready to disinvestment the government's stake in public sector undertakings. So this has actually brought, or this has actually been brought the concept of neoliberalism. We are rolling back the state, and we are saying that okay, the private will actually play an important role. And then there are many thinkers, like we even identify from the political concept, we identify the concept put forwarded by Margaret Thatcher. Then we identify the concept of Hayek. So Hayek has actually confirmed that social justice is a mirage. Mirage means what? Social justice is a mirage. Sir, this is mirage. Okay. Now, I believe that it is being pronounced mirage. I know you can correct me if I am wrong. But what does Hayek mean by saying social justice is a mirage? What do you mean by that? Because what modern liberals are actually trying to do is that they are trying to ensure social justice, right? Because the economy was actually moving, the poor was becoming poor, so they wanted to address it and bring in a social justice, right? And Hayek says that it is a mirage. You cannot actually attain it. What is mirage? What is mirage? Mirage. Okay. So in English it can be identified as a fake image, or we believe that that is there but it is not there. Like Achadin. Okay, fine. So mirage is what? So mirage is actually, that is something, we believe that it is there, but when we reach there, it is not actually there. So social justice is a mirage, means that there is no need for you to pursue that because you are not going to reach there. By trying to pursue that, you are actually hampering the economy. Now you are destabilizing the economy. Don't do that. So this is what Hayek has been actually identifying. Understood? See, Margaret Thatcher has once commented that there is no such thing as society, only individuals and their families. We talk about society, we talk about protecting the society, the state needs to play a role over there. Thatcher says that, okay, no, there are only individuals and families. We need to focus on them. So for that, there is unnecessary emphasis is given on society. Don't do that. Okay, so she has actually gone for deregulation of industry, privatization of the state-owned enterprises, lower the tax burden. So she has actually brought that concept of neoliberalism into the economy. Okay, so have you got how that neoliberalism has been resulted? So the state role has been, the state has been asked to roll back. Then we criticize the dead hand of the state. We started identifying that private is good, public is bad. And we have seen that, like, we brought in FDA we started tax reforms. We started promoting industry. Then a wage has been, there is no intervention in the concept of wage, etc. Now, all these started happening and the economy was actually moving very freely. But do you think that this is the future of liberalism? So I just want to have a thought for with you. No, it's not like this is actually part of the syllabus, etc. But do you think that this neoliberalism is the concept that we need to follow? Many people once argues that, okay, this is something that we need to follow because this has actually brought in prosperity. This has actually brought in innovation. This has actually given hope to millions of people to work hard and be part of in that part of that economic growth. But what happened during a pandemic is something that makes us rethink again about the role of liberalism. Even when the focus is on individual, we started discussing that there is something that the state has to do. The state need not do everything for the people, but state cannot just be a night watchman and be in the back. We cannot completely roll back the front days of the state, right? During a pandemic, has the market came to our rescue? No, market didn't came our rescue, right? Poonawalla told that, okay, I will give 100 rupees as my gesture. But who has actually come to our protection? It's the state. Not only in India, across the world, you will see that during the pandemic, it is the state interventions that has actually helped in addressing it. So to see that, or to say that state has no role to play is actually a mistake. And when you take some Scandinavian countries and certain countries in Europe, like Germany and all, you see that the role played by the state is very crucial there. With respect to health, with respect to education, the role played by the state is very crucial. They don't completely agree with the concept of socialism. And they don't completely disagree with the concept of socialism too. Because they bring in some good elements of socialism. They try to bring in some good elements of liberalism. And they're trying to identify a third way. When they actually try to protect the individual's right on one side. And at the same side, they also try to protect the rights of the individual and also a conditions that is conducive for the welfare of the society. Pandemic in a samayatara nammal protect cheyanundarunnu. Private sector or market or economy onnu allallenallo. State intervene cheyendi vannille. Ille? So that is what actually says that the role of the state is important, and we cannot actually simply argue that it is a liberal free market economy that is going to be the solution in the future. Okay. 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 So Pooja says that it can destroy the system of state. See, what you need to understand is that we cannot actually simply go behind the concept of socialism without, because socialism has its own issues, which we will be discussing now. Okay, because the focus is always on that society or rather than on the individual. So in order to protect the rights of the individual, there has to be a system. So the focus has to be there in that individual itself. At the same time, you cannot simply go for free market economy too. Okay. Then inequalities has actually widened. That is fact during the pandemic period. But at the same time, how we are actually trying to address this pandemic also, the role of the state is crucial. India has not yet reached a state where we can follow neoliberalism and it will ensure benefit for all. Our public goods and infra still remain substandard. And so Anne has actually put forward this very beautifully. We cannot simply go behind neoliberalism. We can bring in elements of neoliberalism. At the same time, there has to be measures taken by the government to improve the conditions, right? The physical, the social infrastructures has to be improved so that the benefits of neoliberalism can be reached or reaped by the people. Now, the benefits of neoliberalism is actually reaped by a small segment of the society. Even during the pandemic, you can see that certain people's, when many people's life and personal wealth is actually lost and they are finding it very difficult to live, you can observe that certain segment of small group of people has actually increased their wealth. Okay, so that inequality has actually widened, but only when state intervenes effectively we can address these issues. And there is one more thing that you need to understand. India is a country which has been independent for 70 years, just more than 70 years, agreed. But we have more, we need to run more to reach that point where following an unrestrained market economy would be beneficial to all. We haven't reached that point yet. There exist inequalities in our society still. And when such an unequal society is being asked to pursue market economy, the privileged people actually gets ahead, right? So they will be the one who will actually be able to grab those benefits. Or else the state needs to ensure a support system to the unprivileged too. Okay. Rise of socialism. Socialism is not entirely dead. We'll come to discuss about that while we are looking into socialism. Okay, see that left is actually coming back in many ideas. I will tell you one small example. Okay, what do you know about IPR? Intellectual property rights, right? IPR, one of the core principles of free market economy. Or else, why should they actually invest in research and all? They do innovation, they do research because they know that they can get money out of it. Got it? So they need to protect their this rights. So IPR is very crucial. So what has actually happened? What's right now being happening? So even America, which is identified as a forefront there in the free market economic model, argues that there is no need for the protection of IPR rights for vaccination right now. Because it's what the Biden has actually identified is that Joe Biden has identified extraordinary circumstances requires extraordinary measures. See, it is an extraordinary measure in the US not to give IPR rights or to deny the IPR rights or to say at least that we need not give the IPR rights right now. So such transition is actually happening throughout the economy. Okay. We need an alert state which is strong and ready to jump in an emergency, but also healthy private sector and policies which ensure competition and entrepreneurship. And to all those people who are out there, it is always advisable that we follow free market economy. Okay, that is no problem. We need to have a very strong, healthy private sector that invests back in the economy and get benefit. Because many people believe in the concept of trickle-down theory. What is the concept of trickle-down theory? So a glass is there, and another glass is in the behind, then glass are kept in the behind in a pyramidal shape, and we are pouring wine into the top, right? So what happens? The first one gets filled, it gets overflow into the second one, then it will overflow into the third line. Like that it will actually go. You got that idea? A wine glass is there, 2 wine glasses in the below, or 3 or 4 in the below. We are trying to fill the first one. When it gets filled, it will come down to the second layer. When it gets filled, it will come down to the third layer. So this is the concept of trickle-down economy. So what actually happens in Indian scenario is that the first wine glass is becoming bigger and bigger. Okay, so its effect or its positives are not effectively getting transferred to the lower segment. And this is something that we need to very crucially look into also. Okay, we'll have more discussions on the economy further, but we need to discuss one important concept which actually made all these changes in liberalism. What is that ideology? That is socialism. Okay, so Let's move to socialism. How do socialism originate? Simple. As a critic to capitalism or as a critic to liberalism. Socialism as a political ideology has originated as a critic to liberalism. So that's a very first point everyone has to remember. So many people started slowly arguing that capitalist mode of production is not going to do good. Capitalist mode of production is not going to do good, and we should actually do what? Okay, we should actually try to focus on the society. We should actually try to focus on corporation, etc. Now, this criticism of liberalism has formulated into a political ideology and started being identified as socialism. So the critique of liberalism, which get consolidated into a new political ideology and started being identified as socialism. So our next objective is to move to socialism. So before moving to socialism, have you any doubt till what we have studied or what we have understood? Is there any doubt so far till what we have understood? Anyone else? So shall I move further? See, socialism is very easy to understand. Okay. So it has raised as a critic to liberalism, right? And what is the core value? The core value is to ensure social equality. So the core value is to, so if the core value in liberalism is the focus on individuality, or the core theme is the individual, we here the core theme is to actually bring in social equality. Okay, excuse me. Fine. So we have seen that in liberalism, man is identified as someone who pursues their objective, their own objective, right? Not for the common welfare, for his welfare. So man is identified as egoistic, or man is identified as very selfish. But when it comes to socialism, they believe that human beings are basically social creatures and they are actually united by common humanity. Human beings are in fact what? Human beings are basically social creatures. United by what? United by humanity. Do they believe in competition? No, they believe in cooperation. Cooperation rather than competition. They believe that human beings could actually cooperate for common good, and that will actually be ensuring that growth. There is no need for individual individual growth contributing to the growth of the market or growth of the economy. But here we will actually promote cooperation among individuals, which will be the fueling factor for the growth. Social equality will be there, and because of that there will be social cohesion between the people, there will be stability within the society, and there would be freedom for personal development also. So these are the some of the fundamental concepts that is being identified in socialism. So they believe that human beings are social creatures united by humanity. See, you see another human being, so we have that fellow connection between human beings. Okay, so they are a bit idealistic, right? Socialism starts in that idealistic romantic mood, which talks about the concept of equality, social equality and all. But we will we'll come to serious concept, but this is how it has originated. See, as a criticism to that, the focus on individualism in liberalism, we started talking more about society, people coming together and cooperating with each other. Now, Sarah has been talking, I have been talking about socialism. Now, let's talk about the core themes. What are the core themes of socialism? See, it's very easy to remember. There are 4 C and 1 E. Okay. Are we focusing on the individual or the community? Right? Community. Correct. First point is community. We focus on community. Okay. So the next is, now, is there going to be competition between the people for development? No. We believe in not in competition. Not we believe. Socialists believe in not in competition but rather in cooperation. Okay. Socialists do believe that there exist different classes of people. There is different classes of people and there exists antagonism between them which needs to get addressed. So they believe in the concept of class politics. Class politics. Then they don't have any faith in profit, private property, etc. And they strongly believe in what? Common ownership. Not the last, but an important theme within socialism is, do they focus on liberty or equality? Do they focus on liberty? No. They focus more on ensuring equality among the people. So, equality. Once again, the core themes are community, cooperation, class politics, common ownership, equality. 4C and 1E. See, equality is not supposed to be in the last, okay? Priority wise, it should come after community itself. But in order to understand that 4C plus C, that is why I have brought it like that. Okay. So let's focus on community. What do you mean by community? So socialists strongly believe that individuals has the capacity to come together, act together in community. They are not actually individuals per se, but they are part of community. Okay, so they have the capability for collective action. Individual ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് നിൽക്കുന്ന ഒരാളല്ല. Individual എന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അവൻ എപ്പോഴും കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയുടെ പാർട്ടാണ്. He is always part of that community. And individual can actually work together. Individuals can come and work together. So there is the possibility of collective action. So we are not only focusing on personal self-interest, we are also focusing on the collective interest of the community. So, and this collective interest of the community can be ensured when we give focus on the community rather than the individual. So this system was there from a long period. If you look at certain American society, certain African tribal society and all, tribal community and all, they believe this concept of community, believe this concept of community ownership. Okay, so traditional societies of Africa, even certain concept being followed in Israel, etc., for a long period, we can see the elements of community, focusing on community, which is one of the core themes in socialism. So the focus is not on the individual, the focus is on the community. Individuals is not actually trying to fulfill his personal interests, but ready to come together for the collective action. And that is the concept of community. Okay. So no man is an island, right? Now moving to cooperation. So the idea of cooperation is that man is actually ready to pursue or ready to contribute for common good. Man is not only focusing on his own individual development, but he is ready to contribute for the common good. So that is the reason why man has actually prospered over the period. So even when there were bigger animals, fiercer animals in the history, if you look at that evolution, man has prospered over the period. Why? Because man was ready to cooperate with each other. Man has prospered because man has cooperated. That is the concept. Okay. Understood? I am because we are. So focusing on we rather than I. Okay, see, this concept of cooperation was there for a long period. Eh? It is some of the fundamental values within many communities. And that is what being identified as the core theme of what core theme of socialism too. Okay, good. Now, we'll talk about equality. See, as I told earlier, this is a very fundamental concept. We try to identify equality or social equality. We try to bring in social cohesion between the people. Cohesion means what? The concept of being closeness, right? So, being close within a community. So, we try to bring in what? Bring in equality of outcome. Social egalitarianism. Social egalitarianism. Or equality of outcome. When liberals or post-liberals believe in equality of opportunity, socialists try to ensure equality of equality of outcome. So equality of opportunity is that we are giving equal opportunity to all. But when we talk about equality of outcome, we don't focus on this concept of opportunity. We try to see whether everyone has received it or not. Everyone has got it or not. So that is the concept of equality of outcome. Rather than saying that, okay, everyone is in the race and everybody has, can go for the prizes, which is the primary concept of equality of opportunity. Here we are talking about equality of outcome. Now everyone gets, everyone wins. Okay, so we try to ensure a fairness in the system. We try to ensure that every person is actually getting his due share. Every person is getting his due share. We are not leaving people out there. We are trying to ensure that everyone is getting his share. And we try to bring in the concept of community and cooperation along with this. And we argue that, see, the need satisfaction is a base of human fulfillment. Now, we need to identify the need and we need to satisfy the needs. And that is very fundamental concept when we discuss about Marxism or communism also. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. So we need to identify the need, we need to get this need satisfied. And that can actually happen when we are part of a larger community which try or which pursue for social equality. So social equality or equality of outcome. Have you understood that concept of equality of outcome? Now it doesn't mean that we create a system where everybody has that opportunity. We create a system where everybody gets it. So we are worried about the outcome over here. Understood? So within socialism itself, there are different themes within socialism, different methods through which socialism is being attained. We'll come to that point. So these people have actually differentiated this concept of equality of outcome. For example, the Marxists have seen it from a different perspective. Social Democrats try to see it from a different perspective, etc. So Marxist strongly opposes what? Opposes private ownership, opposes profit, private ownership. Collective ownership is something that is being identified. Everything being owned by the community. Social Democrats, even when they follow the principles of socialism, they try to address this gap because it is very difficult to actually bring equality with respect to the income. It is very difficult to actually bring in that equality with respect to the income. So Social Democrats believe in addressing that gap. But they are also trying to pursue or ensure the concept of social egalitarianism. Okay. Okay. So you want to understand equality of outcome, right? Okay. I will give an example. Okay. I normally give this example in the class also. And I decided to give, during my birthday, I decided that, and I told all of my students that, okay, don't bring lunch today. Now I will ensure lunch for all of you. I will ensure lunch for all of you. Okay. Then I take the number of people and I arranged biryani for you people. Okay. So let's say that are 100 students. and okay, only for my optional students. The biryani is available only for my optional students. Okay, okay. So I told my students that okay, I have kept the biryani in the office. You can go and collect it. So I'm, this is actually giving equal opportunity all to go and get something. If the resource is constrained, like let's say that like there are 50 biryanis and there are 100 students, and we are giving everyone, see there are 50 biryanis over there, you can go and get it. Only those people who actually reach there in the first 50s will be able to get it. But consider a situation where there are 100 biryanis are there, and I ensure that everyone is actually getting one biryani. See, I don't give equal opportunity. I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried whether everyone is getting or not. A social system where the focus is not on ensuring opportunity to get the resources of the society, but the focus is on the distribution of these resources. That is what we identify by equality of outcome. Have you got it? See, and Marxism is something that we are going to see. Okay, so Marxists strongly believe in completely abolishing the system, but social democrats believe in addressing that inequality. That means economic equality is very difficult to attain, but we can minimize the inequality. See, if you look into our constitution, there is Article 38 is there. In Article 38, there is an addition made by the Janata government. So the Janata government talks about addressing the inequalities. So it says that minimizing inequalities in income and eliminating inequalities. I mean, it talks about minimizing inequalities in income and eliminating inequalities in opportunity and all. So on one segment, we can actually eliminate the inequalities by ensuring or considering everyone as same. But when it comes to the economic concept, we can actually reduce or minimize the inequality. So that is something that is being pursued by the social democrats too. So all of you understood the concept of social or equality of outcome. Understood it? Many times what happens in society is that resources are there, but it is always limited. When there are more demand for the resources, we try to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to go and get it. But we don't ensure that everybody is getting it. In case of socialism, whatever resource is actually available, that resources is being distributed in order to address the needs of the people. Got it? Fine. Now, moving to class politics, the concept of class politics is that there is economic difference in community, and because of that, because of this difference in distribution of income, socialist is actually trying to analyze the society on the basis of distribution of income. People who have money and people who doesn't. So there is a class of people who has money, there is a class of people who doesn't have money. Okay, and this class politics exists. This class politics exists. So the people who has money is actually trying to oppress the people who doesn't have money. And this class politics is one of the core themes in socialism. Okay, so what do you mean by class politics? So society is being analyzed on the basis of distribution of wealth. We see that there are a segment of people who have money, there are people who doesn't have money. The class that have money is oppressing the class that doesn't have money. And that is the fundamental idea of what? Fundamental idea of class politics. Understood that? Manasalayo? So, socialism works along with what? Along with the class that don't have. Okay, so they are actually trying to emancipate the class that doesn't have. So, the haves and the have-nots is there. Have means, I mean, this distribution, sorry, this classification is on the basis of what? On the basis of distribution of money. Haves, those who have money, have not, those who doesn't have money. So, socialism focuses on the emancipation of the have-nots. Okay. Now, the last one, right? So, what? So, fine. So, Ashik is asking, is socialism promote classless society? See, socialism aims for addressing the inequalities in the classes, but it is actually not focusing on coming to a classless society as being identified where, as being identified in Marxism. Marxism strictly talks about a classless society, which we are going to see. And there is one more thing that you need to understand, that when we are discussing ideology, Marxism is an ideology within socialism. Even though there are a lot of discussions, debates going on trying to identify Marxism as a separate ideology, but you need to identify it as, that is how it has originated. And Marx himself identifies his ideology as scientific socialism. We'll come to those concepts also. So while we discuss about Marxism also, you will try to get a clarity between these two concepts of socialism and Marxism. So in socialism, even though when we talk about class politics, it doesn't go for a complete abolition of the classes. It primarily focuses on the emancipation of the lower class or the have-nots. Okay, now we are done with community, we are done with cooperation, we are done with class politics, we are done with the common ownership, we are done with equality. Now there is common ownership. So private property, for socialists, private property is actually unjust. Okay, why it is unjust? It is unjust because the labor is not effectively, now I will give an example for that, and you yourself say whether it is unjust or not. See, I brought in 10,000 rupees worth wood. It's simply wood right now. It's wood, nothing else. So a labor came, and this 10,000 rupees worth wood is actually converted into, let's say, 10 dining tables, each worth 10,000 rupees. Okay, so this 1,000 rupee wood is converted into 1 lakh rupee worth furniture. But this extra 90,000, right? A very small amount, this extra 90,000 only goes to whom? Goes to the worker. So even though the value creation has been done by the worker, the amount received by the worker for increasing that value or that surplus value, only part of that surplus value goes into the pocket of the worker as his wages, as his salary. Only very small amount. The rest is actually pocketed by whom? Pocketed by the capitalist or me. And socialists strongly argue that, see, this is not correct. The surplus value is not effectively distributed. It is being identified as a profit. So they strongly oppose profit and private ownership. They also oppose what? They identify that this is morally corrupting and this is actually divisive or creating conflict in society. So common ownership, done with common ownership. There is no need to pursue common ownership. Okay. So these are the 5 themes of what? 5 themes of socialism. Community, corporation, class politics, common ownership and equality. Any doubt? See, the fundamental doubt you have right now is that, sir, how it is different from the concept of Marxism? Okay, we'll come to that point. Okay, see, all those doubts you keep it there, because while we discuss about Marxism, it will give more clarity to that. Other than that, have you understood the focus giving on community, the focus on the concept of cooperation rather than competition, the focus of equality, the social equality, social egalitarianism or equality of output? Then have you understood the concept of common ownership and class politics? Have you? Has all of you understood this? Any doubt? You don't seem to be that enthusiastic right now. I think you do have some. Okay, are you clear? Okay, fine. Now, when it comes to socialism, how do we reach there? So that is something that actually very crucial for our discussion, because we not only talk about socialism, we also talk about the road to socialism. And we believe that there are 2 roads. Okay, we are going one direction, this direction. So we have the revolutionary socialism. And we have the evolutionary socialism. And within revolutionary socialism, you will come across concept of Marxism. Okay, so are you getting a bit clarity right now? So Marxism can be, socialism can be attained in different ways. One is revolutionary socialism, one is evolutionary socialism. So revolutionary socialism is a sudden, or they try to attain the social change through a revolution or through a sudden action, through violent action. But evolutionary socialism believes in the small but continuous transition in achieving socialism. So revolutionary socialism strongly argues that, okay, we can bring in social change, but it will actually require class struggle, revolution, dictatorship of the proletariat, etc. Revolution is not something that we should be shy away from. Revolution is not something that we should be shy away from. And what is actually a revolution? A revolution is actually the midwife of social change. Who is a midwife? Midwife is someone who actually gives birth. വൈറ്റാട്ടി എന്ന് മലയാളത്തിൽ വിളിക്കും. നമ്മുടെ ഭാഷയിലൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു ഗൈനക് നേഴ്സ് എന്ന് വിളിക്കാം. So someone who is actually bringing a baby to the world. So in such a manner, revolution is actually bringing a new social order. You need not worry about revolution. So the revolutionary socialists strongly believe or the use of violence in attaining what? In attaining their objectives. Okay, so they believe in the violent overthrow of the existing system in order to bring in socialism. Okay, in Malayalam, we can call it Viplavam Thokin Kudalilude. When it being translated, but change through bullet. Right. Now, what is happening in evolutionary socialism? In evolutionary socialism, they don't believe in this violent overthrow. Now, they argue that, okay, we should go for what? We should go for a fundamental, small but fundamental changes in the system. Incremental changes in the system. And that is what being identified as an evolutionary socialism. They don't believe in violent protest or violent overthrow of the government. They try to believe that it could actually attain through what? Attain through democratic means. Changes could actually be brought through democratic means. Viplavam, ballot pettilude. In Malayalam we say that change through ballot and change through bullet. So revolutionary socialists believe in what? Change through bullet. But evolutionary socialists believe in what? Change through ballot. Understood? മനസ്സിലായോ? So Marxism or syndicalism. Syndicalism is a form of violent socialist trade union movement. Syndicalism is a violent revolutionary socialism, which is actually a French concept. Okay, they strongly believe in violent course of action to bring about social change. Okay. But when it comes to evolutionary socialism, we can actually identify Fabianism, or guild socialism, etc. So evolutionary socialists believe that if we are actually able to capture the power through democratic means, then we can bring in policies that will actually ensure socialism. There is it will take time, but slowly we will reach there. That is the concept of evolutionary socialism. So, who can you identify over here? Someone from India? See, Nehru strongly believed in the concept of socialism, right? Now, if it was not for the Congress policy of being an umbrella party at that time, Nehru would have started a socialist party over here because he strongly believed in the socialist concept. Even within Congress itself, there were a lot of takers for the socialist concept. So Nehru believed, or Nehruvian socialism is something identified along with that evolutionary socialism. So it is also being identified along with Fabianism. So see, basically Fabian socialism is named after the Roman general Fabius Maximus, who was actually waiting for the right time to strike. So it actually means that slowly, like we need not go for a violent, we will wait, we will wait, and slowly we will actually attain it. So they strongly advocate gradualism. Gradualism means that not a complete change on overnight, but gradually we are making changes to the system. Okay. So they believe that socialist parties has to be there. They should compete in the parliament. They should compete in the parliament and they should get elected. Then once they will form the government, they will bring in policies that will actually ensure that cooperation is there. That will ensure that focus is given on community. That will ensure that social egalitarianism is brought in. That will ensure that emancipation of the class that doesn't have. That will also ensure what that common ownership is minimal. The concept of common ownership is minimal. So the objective of socialism being attained through what? Attained through policies. So that is what evolutionary socialists believe in. Okay. Understood? Have you got it? Kittiyo. So when it comes to Fabianism, we can identify Nehruvian socialism, George Bernard Shaw, Beatrice Webb, etc. are major thinkers over there. Okay. Guild socialism is a bit different, but they also believe in this evolutionary model. So guild socialism, the idea is that it focuses on guild. Okay. Okay. What are guilds? So guilds are like economic groups. So right now we have representation on the basis of territory, right? Okay. In guild, there will be a guild for the teachers, there will be a guild for, so guild is like an economic group for farmers, guild for traders, etc. So they strongly argue that there has to be a representation from the various economic group. So each guild need to be represented in the parliamentary process, so that their voice is actually heard in the policy making. So instead of this territorial representation, they strongly argue for a functional representation. Okay, so in a democratic system, they argue for what? They argue for functional representation. So guilds are like economic groups representing a particular particular profession, farmers, teachers, workers, and they will need, they need to be get represented where in the democratic system, so that their voice get in the policy making. So that is what guild socialism means. Okay, see, trade unionism is actually a form of guild socialism where only certain segments has this trade union. See, in guilds, the primary idea is that like, okay, trade unionism is like voicing for their rights. It doesn't ensure that they get representation in the parliament and all. But guilds, the concept of guild socialism is that the guilds needs to get represented. The economic groups needs to get represented. It's very similar, but guild socialism goes one step ahead than being just an association. They want to get represented in the parliamentary system. Okay. Understood? So, there is a famous thinker called G.D.H. Cole, C-O-L-E, Cole, who has brought in the concept of guild socialism. Like the different profession being divided into different guilds, and these guilds getting represented in the parliamentary system. Okay, fine. So have you understood? So have you understood so far? Okay, see, syndicalism is actually, see, what is syndicalism? Syndicalism, we try to identify syndicalism along with the revolutionary socialism. Why? Because they follow violent methods. So, for example, like these are basically working class organizations. It's like a French variant of the socialism where these working class groups believe in violent methods of protest. Okay, so they believe in violent strikes, lockdown, etc. And through that, they are actually trying to ensure that their voice is getting represented. Okay, so syndicates only acknowledge an economic state where the entire power is in the hands of the workers. So syndicalism believes that, so I mean syndicals are basically what? Basically like trade unions, working class groups. But they believe in violent methods of protest. They wanted that the power should ultimately lie in the hand of the workers. So that is the fundamental concept with respect to syndicalism. Okay. So these are, I mean, we try to identify it along with revolutionary socialism because of the modes they have identified for capturing the power. So they argue for more for a revolutionary system. Okay. Fine. Sir, is it a theory right now? Can it ever be practical? Because all organizations will have their own interests which may be conflicting with each other. And that's a very interesting concept. Okay. So, see, Rashmi, before moving to Anne's question and concluding today's session, so Rashmi just asked about Fabianism. See, Fabianism argues for gradualism. That means change not through an overnight, but through over a period we are reaching that change. Not all of a sudden we are bringing through violent revolution and all we are bringing the change. No, through democratic means we get into the power, we increase our number. There has to be a socialist party, and this socialist party will be part of what will be part of the democratic system, and through democratic system they will actually try to bring in changes. They don't solely believe on this violent concept of power overthrow and getting and capturing the power. They believe that they need to be in a democratic system there needs to be more number of representation from their side, which will actually ensure that their voice is heard in the policy decision making. So that is what Fabianists believe. So they advocate gradualism in bringing change. So revolutionary, there is no gradualism, change overnight, change over a period. Okay, fine. So now the question is that, is socialism dead? But in order to understand whether socialism is dead or not, we need to have more focus on the revolutionary socialism, Marxism. Then we try to see whether Marxism is dead or even Marxism is even being attained. There are many countries which has actually argued that, okay, see, ours is a Marxist state. But do you think that actually Marxism is being practiced anywhere in its fullest spirit as being identified by Marx? To what extent do you think that a political system is a Marxist system? Have they reached that final point where Marx has actually identified? Marx makes us to believe in a system where there exists no class, there is no common ownership, everyone is equal. Have we reached that point? That is something that needs to be addressed. Even though many people has actually argued that their system is actually a communist mode of production or a communist system per se, they haven't reached that point. And on criticizing Marxism, from that perspective, we need to understand that even though Marx is being criticized a lot and Marx is being identified as the god that has actually failed, we fail to understand whether Marxism is being fully implemented. So that is something that we will see in the next class. Along with Anne's question, whether socialism can be fully or effectively implemented. See, socialism is not dead. The revisions that is actually happening in liberalism over a period is primarily because of the fact that there exists something known as socialism. So socialism is not going to be dead. Socialism is not going to be an ideology of the past. It will reinvent itself and it will try to make changes into the existing system. So in the future, there is chances for socialism to reinvent itself as a critique to capitalism and to come again and to evolve again. That is something that we'll see in the future. So I hope that in the next class on Monday we are going to discuss about Marxism. So Marxism is full of terminologies. So we'll try to understand the basic terminologies, and we'll try to take from each step and reach that ideal point where Marx has actually hoped us that we will also reach. But whether we reach there or not, whether the policies that is being followed in many countries has reached there or not is something that we need to address. So I hope that everybody has actually understood what we have discussed today, socialism. Socialism, ellarkum manasilayo? See, Needu's question, like Anna has asked, is it a theory right now? Can it ever be practical? So it is being practiced in many places. Okay, it is being practiced in many places, but the problem is that none of the ideology could ever be practiced in its fullest form itself. When we say liberalism, there are elements of socialism there. When we say socialism, there are elements of liberal principles over there. So right now, many countries doesn't follow one particular ideology per se. Okay. Okay, fine. So I think with this we will conclude today's class. Now I just want to give you one thought for you. Okay. You know Hitler, right? Okay, I believe you know Hitler. What was the name of the party founded by the Hitler? Think about it. Then there are many countries across the world right now which argues that they are socialist countries, and try to think about what policies they are actually following. Many people has actually utilized the word socialism in order to promote their objectives. And because of that reason itself, we see socialism as what? Socialism is like a hat. Like a hat that I won, then I have given it to Ammu. Ammu's head is much bigger than mine, so it became bigger. Then I gave it to, let's say, Abdul. Abdul has a smaller hair, so Abdul is trying to tighten it for him. So every person tried to redefine socialism to meet their objective. And that is why socialism is being identified as a hat that has lost its shape, because everyone tries to wear it. This is a statement that UPSC always asks. Socialism is like a hat, toppi, worn by many. Like many people has actually tried it, and because of that reason it has actually lost its shape. Understood? So even Hitler has actually used the word socialism, and the socialism has been used and being practiced in many forms. In most of these cases, you will see that they have actually utilized the word socialism in order to attain their objective. When it comes to India, don't go to the Hitler angle. When it comes to India, when it comes to the policies of Indira Gandhi, you see that Indira Gandhi also argued in the name of what? In the name of socialist principles, right? So she also used the word socialism in order to attain their objectives. So socialism has been worn by many. Many people has actually utilized that. And because of that reason itself, socialism has actually turned out to be like a hat that has worn by many, that it has lost its actual shape. So with this, we will actually conclude today's session. I hope that I will meet all of you in Marxism. Marxism is very interesting. See, Marxism is interesting in the sense that we all have been talking about Marxism, because from Kerala, or all the people, political ideology, when we discuss about political ideology, Marxism is first thing that comes to everyone's mind. But to what extent do we really know Marxism? What is being Marxism as identified by Marx, and what is being practiced? This is something that we will discuss in next class. Okay. So we will meet tomorrow's class, in Monday's class. I hope to meet all of you there also. Thank you. Happy learning.